Hey, what is up guys? My name is Zach Ballack and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 tips for photographing your first wedding. Let's get into it. So tip number one is to know your camera in and out. It is essential that you know all of your camera settings and how to operate your camera and to be especially using manual mode. Using manual mode is going to allow you to get unique shots with different depths of field and being able to expose your camera for the correct settings. If you aren't shooting in manual mode, I don't think you're ready to be the main photographer for a wedding. Possibly as a second shooter, but I highly recommend that you know your camera in and out before being the main photographer for a wedding. My second tip for you guys is to be a second shooter at a wedding first off, or to at least have some type of experience doing portraits, say a set of senior pictures. One thing that I recommend doing also is trying to shoot a family friend. If you know a family friend that is getting married, ask them if you can bring your camera and be a part of the process of photographing their wedding. This will relieve all of the stress from you knowing that you don't have to deliver any photos to them, and you can kind of get an understanding of how a wedding works from the photography side first. Another tip that I have is to try and find a young couple. That's what happened in my instance, where it was a young couple getting married and they weren't having a huge wedding and weren't trying to spend a ton of money on their wedding, so they didn't want to hire a photographer that was going to cost them a lot of money. So going into it, they knew my background, that I'd never done a wedding before. They still felt confident in my ability, and so it worked for both ends. Now I know for some people, likewise for me, you're not going to be a second photographer for your first wedding. Although it would have been super helpful and I wish I would have done it, that's not always the case. And then if an opportunity arises for you to be a photographer, I say go for it because it's just going to be better experience. But there is some things that you do need to make sure you are aware of before doing your first wedding. And that leads into tip number three. Tip number three is to do your research. One of the biggest things that you can do is watch YouTube videos. Honestly, that's what I did. Is there's so many tutorials out there and advice on shooting a wedding that you can learn a lot. I highly recommend spending time researching what people have to say about being a photographer for a wedding and what all goes into it. The next piece of advice that goes on to that is to look up different poses, whether it's on Google or YouTube or wherever. Just look up different poses that people often do for weddings and save these on your phone. This can be very helpful for when you're on the wedding day and you're trying to think of different ideas to do for photos and you have a bunch already saved on your phone. It can relieve a lot of the stress that you may have. Another thing that goes along with doing your research is to print out a shot list. There's a bunch of different shot lists online that kind of lay out the different shots that you should be getting throughout the day. Whether this is from detail shots of the rings, flowers, the wedding dress, all the way up to different poses that you should be doing with the bride and groom alone, with the bridesmaids and groomsmen and family. It can be very helpful for when you're on the wedding day and you might not necessarily know what you should be doing. You can look at your shot list and go from there. Tip number four is to coordinate with the bride and groom beforehand. This is something that I did a little bit, but I wish I would have done a lot better. Going into the wedding day, you need to know the time frame of everything that is happening and what they are expecting of you. You should ask them if there's any certain types of photos that they want. I know in my case, they especially wanted a bridesmaid reveal shot, so I made sure that that was going to happen. Also, when coordinating with them, you can talk about the time frame that you're going to have for photos. I recommend having at least 2 hours to try and do photographs with the bride and groom family and the bridesmaids and groomsmen, whether it's before or after the ceremony. I did mine before the ceremony, and I felt like it went really well because everyone was still in the preparation of everything before the ceremony, and so it kind of just led into everything and filled that gap between getting ready and the actual ceremony. But yeah, it's very important that you do coordinate with the bride and groom. This just kind of lays out your day for you, and you can plan on where you need to be at different times. Tip number five is to scout the location early and or show up early. If you have the ability to go to the actual location of where the wedding will be beforehand, this can be very helpful. I did have that ability, and I made sure to do that, especially since it was my first time ever doing a wedding. I wanted to make sure I was aware of my surroundings. So I was able to find different areas that I thought would make good backgrounds for photos, and also to see the different lighting elements inside the venue. Tip number six is the most essential gear that you should have with you when you are photographing a wedding. Having the right gear can be crucial to whether you get shots or miss shots. Now I actually have a separate video that goes really into depth on what all gear I brought to my first wedding and what I used it for. So that video will be linked right up here, and I highly recommend you going to check it out after watching this video. Tip number 7 is to become friends with the DJ. I can't express how important this is and how helpful it was for me. Most often, the DJs that are going to be at a wedding have done multiple weddings beforehand, and they're going to be the ones that kind of run the show and are doing the timeline of the different events during the day, whether it's the first dance, dinner time, cutting the cake. Everything kind of goes off the DJ schedule, and they're the ones that's announcing it. So if you can be talking with them, you're going to know when everything is going on after the ceremony. The also helpful part about becoming friends with the DJ is that they can help you out. I talked to the DJ a lot, and he was kind of giving me tips on what different shots I could get and where I could be standing. And it was really helpful and relieved a lot of my stress. Finally, one of the biggest reasons that I was super happy that I started talking to the DJ was that he had extra lights. And so I was able to use some of his lights inside the venue to help light the area and get better shot. Going off of that, that leads me into tip number 8, which is lighting. Lighting on a wedding day is so huge and can make the difference of whether you get good shots or bad shots. Now this can go for both when you're outside and for later on in the night when you're during the ceremony. During the day, you need to be careful of the sunlight and making sure that you're exposing correctly for the sunlight and that it's not overpowering your images. For example, if it's a really bright day and the sun's shining down, it's going to be really hard if that sunlight is directly behind you. You're going to have a completely blown out background if you have the people in correct exposure. So you need to make sure that you are aware of where the sun is and how it's going to be affecting your images. When it comes to later in the day and you're at your ceremony, most likely it's going to be pretty dark. Most venues most likely aren't going to have very good lighting, and this can create a lot of problems. If you don't have a very expensive camera like I do, I shoot on the Nikon D3300, I can really only put the ISO up to 800, 1600 is like the max, and the image quality starts getting really noisy. So for a beginner photographer, this can be pretty tough because you're most likely not going to have the budget to have professional lighting and have a lot of lights on hand. The one thing that I highly recommend, and I do not think you should do a wedding without, is an extra flash. This is the flash that I had for my wedding. It's the Yongnuo Digital Speedlight, and I don't think these are too expensive, but I would not have been able to do my wedding without this. This saved me, and I was still able to get good shots during the ceremony. Now, this is going to be crucial because you're capturing things like the cake cutting, the bride and groom's first dance, and the entire reception. So this is essential, and you need to have one of these for a wedding. Tip number 9 is to not be afraid of getting in people's way. Shooting your first wedding, especially if you don't have a lot of experience, can be very nerve-wracking, and you might be hesitant to get out in the middle of a crowd and start getting in people's way, but you are the photographer for this wedding. This is their day, and you have to capture all of the moments. So you have to be willing to get out on the dance floor and to get in front of people. You need to capture the moments of this day. It can be pretty nerve-wracking at first, but once you do it the first couple times, it's nothing, and you're good to go for the rest of the night. So just don't be afraid and get out of your comfort zone and make sure that you're capturing all of the different moments. Finally, my last and final tip is to have fun and go for it. If you're watching this video and you're contemplating whether you're going to do a wedding or not, just go for it. It's going to seem very daunting at first and you're going to be very nervous, but if you do the planning ahead of time, it's going to eliminate a lot of your stress, and it is such great experience, and you'll become a much better photographer because of it. You're never going to get better if you don't take risks. When it comes down to the wedding day, just have fun with it. Be out there, just start shooting, get in the groove of things, and enjoy it and have fun. It's a really fun experience to be able to capture someone amazing day. So those are my 10 tips if it is your first time photographing a wedding. I hope this was helpful for you guys. And if you want to check out my list for essential gear to bring to a wedding, make sure you check out the video above, and it'll be linked in the description. So thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for more.